Next, we have coastal protection of the Kingston Harbour by Dr. Christopher Burgess. Now, Dr. Burgess is the Managing Director of Sewage Solutions Company Limited since September 2001. He has a degree in civil engineering from the University of the West Indies, St. Augustine campus, and he has a Master's of Science in Environmental Engineering Technology, from Imperial College London. And he has a PhD, Doctor of Philosophy, Climate Studies, Physics from the University of the West Indies, Mona. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Burgess.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Gary. Should I just share the presentation from here, Gary?
Yes, good morning, Chris. I'll answer for everybody.
Yes.
I'm sure they all said morning wherever they are.
Yes. I promise that my presentation won't be as interesting as Martin's. So I hope to keep your attention. One second, Gary.
Once you give us pretty pictures, we like it.
Yes, yes. I have a few pretty pictures. Let me share the right screen first. Oops. New share. I think this is it here. Can we see that? Gary?
Yes, we can.
We're seeing it.
Okay, great. All right. Thank you for allowing us this opportunity, Gary. So I want to speak with you very briefly over the next 18 slides about the Port Royal Street shoreline protection works. The client for this particular project is JSIF, and this is a project which was conceptualized quite a few years back, about 11 years back. The outline of the presentation is I'm going to give you some background and the motivations for protecting the shoreline from what most would know as Raytown to the new Foreign Affairs building. I'll give you an idea as to our consultations in engineering. Very often we find ourselves not only doing environmental studies, but social studies to inform our designs. I'll tell you a little bit about the design basis that inform the height of the road and the height of the revetment. I'll show you the physical modeling, a video of the physical modeling that we did for the revetment. I'll give you some insight into what we're doing now for the last 6 months, which is a contractor administration and monitoring. And then finally, I will step back from this project and show you what is left to be done in our estimation in Kingston as it relates to coastal protection. A little summary about this project. Modern projects now, the requirement from the funders have to do require some amount of climate resilience. This project is designed to be climate resilient up to about 2050 for the 50-year return period, 100-year depending on the component we're looking at. It's 1.5 kilometers of road from Raytown Fishing Beach to Ministry of Foreign Affairs. It fits into the UDC's master plan for the downtown Kingston, which is essentially a boardwalk from Festival Marketplace to Palisadoes. So hopefully another project will come along that will see the boardwalk continuing along through Rockford. The works that we're dealing with now is valued at 950 million. Again, some background and motivation. the Kingston metropolitan area and the shorelines associated with it, from say the port area to Flour Mills, Rockford Cement Company, and Palisados. In general, the shoreline is vulnerable to sea level rise, to waves and erosion. But in addition to that, the shoreline also provides, the shoreline often has associated with it a coastal road network. And you'll see in the bottom left-hand picture there, the Port Royal Street Road. This road has a traffic volume of about 16,000 vehicles per day. And the service that this road provides in terms of not having to detour or take alternative routes is valued about $13.5 million US a year. That is, of course, when you take in the cost of an alternative route and the extra time and added fuel for the route. So this road provides a social good and a convenient way of connecting persons from the east of Kingston and on the eastern side of Kingston to Spanish Town, etc. In a lot of instances, the shoreline associated with the KME is deteriorating. You can see as well in this picture of Port Royal Street, a very loose revetment. And we also have very expensive assets as well associated with the shorelines of Kingston Harbour. Not only the digital building, but Petrojam, etc. A little bit about the hazards, the coastal hazards associated with Kingston Harbour. Not only is the shoreline exposed to the deep waters of the Caribbean Sea, but also the wind-generated waves within the harbour. And we see where outside in the future we expect waves to increase, and they have been increasing from about 8.8 meters to about 12.2 meters in the future. And this, of course, is due to an increase in the number of intense hurricanes which are projected. If anyone looked at the National Hurricane Center's website this morning, you'd have seen, I believe there's 6 systems in the Atlantic. The project here, back to our project here, inside of the harbour, in extreme conditions, you can expect wave heights of 2 to 3 meters, that's 8 to 12 feet. Very often on a normal day, you can easily get 3 foot, 4 foot waves within the harbour. And so it's because of these prevailing operating conditions as well as extreme conditions now and in the future why we have to protect the shoreline. A little bit about the assets associated with the shoreline. It doesn't make sense to spend good money if there's nothing to protect, but that's not the case in Kingston. If you look 30 meters behind the shoreline of Kingston Harbour from the port coming around to downtown, onto Rockford, on the Palisados where you have the Norman Manley Airport, to Port Royal where you have the JDF Coast Guard, you quickly see that the value of those national assets and private assets add up considerably. The estimated maximum direct loss in that zone is about 1.8 billion US. And when we've looked in the past at the annualized risk, a concept which economists use to justify or to examine the feasibility of projects is to look at the annualized risk. We see where Kingston's annualized coastal risk is about 11.6 million US. It helps to put investment of works into context. So, and it's useful, yeah, to put investment of the works into context. So let's come back to this project now. In 2009, the National Works Agency, after Hurricane Ivan 2004, realized, and Dean realized that a number of our shorelines in the Kingston Harbour were deteriorating, and they asked for an assessment of where needed protection and an estimate of the cost. In 2009 and 2012, a rough estimate at the time was that to protect the shorelines of Kingston Harbour would cost about $18 million. So that's $18 million in comparison to an annualized risk of $11 million. Immediately you can see that if you can mitigate $11.6 million each year with $18 million spent properly one time, it makes sense. In 2016, JSIF took up the reins, and through a World Bank project, the JDVRP in 2016 pulled this project together, which is the works that we see happening down there now. And it's under this effort that we're currently doing the works. Like any good engineering project in the public domain, and particularly with international funding, public consultation is a must. Documented public consultation is a must. There were several public consultation events. This is a picture of one that was held in May 2018 to define the needs of the project, not only with the regulators, but with the users of the and inhabitants of the project area. So in this particular case, in addition to the usual NAA, NEPA, and KSAC, we also spoke extensively to UDC and to the fisher folks. Coming out of these consultations, there were several requirements. One was that there was a need for it's not 16-foot or 15-foot boardwalk. Again, that fits in with the master plan for UDC of a boardwalk from Festival Marketplace, which is the craft market, to Palisados. And there was a request to not make the revetment crest elevation particularly high to enable us to maintain the visibility of the sea from the road. That was one of the complaints of the Palisados. As you drive along to the airport, persons were complaining that they couldn't see the coastline. The protection, of course, is increases with the height of the structure above the roadway, and so that's not always possible. Another requirement, social requirement, was that the fishing beaches that were present in the project area should be maintained to facilitate their activities. And although there were some clashes of interest between the fisher folks and some of the government agencies, a compromise was reached, and one of the two beaches were maintained. That's a fishing beach in addition to Raytown. Just to kind of summarize what came out of those consultations, you see one of the fishing beaches here. It's not a great picture. There were several boats to the right of this. But if you look at the cross section of the boardwalk, there was this notion of having a 15-foot wide boardwalk with street side lighting and bollards right next to the roadway, and then a seawall with a revetment in front of it. From the consultations, over 80% of the persons that we spoke to were supportive of the project. All right, so moving on to the engineering part of it and the hazard part of it. These two diagrams show you what the 50 and 100-year storm surge looks like for downtown Kingston in the future climate. You see storm surge levels of 3.11 meter projected over the roads of Kingston. The storm surge in the future with sea level rise, we estimate to be about 2.1. And in this particular project, we designed a roadway not to be inundated in the 50-year event. Not that anyone will be out there in the 50 year, but to preserve the condition of the road after the 50 year. This is a look at the wave climate in the harbour under the 50 and 100 year. The seawall itself was designed to the 100-year return period for 2.4 meter wave heights and the crest elevation to the 100-year as well. The crest elevation is key because it minimizes the overtopping and it maintains the integrity of the road afterwards. You don't want in events less than a 50 year that you're rebuilding road necessarily. You want to maintain the integrity of the road. We used a physical scale model, 1:64 scale, to inform the design or to better inform the design. This is a picture of our scale model. This is Monique building, putting on the caps on what would be the retaining wall, recurve wall, and the stones that we would use to that are coordinated with the armor stone size we're investigating. So this physical scale model is a follow-on investigation after using your traditional empirical models to size the stones. It helps us to test if smaller stone sizes are feasible and if different arrangements are feasible to lower the overtopping. And it was very useful because it indicated that the overtopping and the stone size that we had derived from the empirical models were feasible and that the damage would be acceptable after the 100 year. I have a small video to show you. I wish it was taken a little bit more vertical. So this is an idea of our physical wave or physical scale model. You'll see a little overtopping of the revetment wall, recurve wall. And after running the equivalent of 6,000 waves, we stop it and we look at the deflection of these stones and compare it to tolerable limits to ensure that the damage is within acceptable levels. This device here, I'm not certain if you can see my cursor, is a wave gauge. So we measure the wave heights literally at near the toe of the structure to coordinate with the design conditions. In this particular scale model, we test, for example, the 50 and 100 year to ensure that the roofs are robust enough. Right? All right, so after having done our design and surveys and our public consultation, this is an overview of the proposed works. On the western side is Ministry of Foreign Affairs. The revetment starts about there. There's a fisherman's beach. It's not a fishing beach. Fisher folks beach is where they anchor their boats. There's a small public park that will go here, with some public art. There's a pedestrian bridge to ensure that the boardwalk is continuous. And then on the eastern end, right next to Raytown, we have some public parking and a bathroom. It's improved version of what we have at Palisados, where there are 3 public parking areas. So there will be public parking here, but there will also be a restroom. We're now in the contract administration and construction monitoring stage. The contractor who won this tender is S&G Road Surface Materials in association with Smith Warner, who are the project managers. As I said before, it's 1.1 kilometers of revetment and roadworks with boardwalk, approximately 950 million. It's a 12-month construction period. So in this contract administration and construction phase, we had to do the usual contract and contract review and drawing reviews. We had another set of community meetings, kickoff meetings. On a daily basis, we monitor the works. This is one of our engineers. She's checking the steel work, and she's also checking the stone sizes and the quality of the stones being delivered to the site and the packing of the stones on a daily basis. We report weekly and monthly to the client, and we also certify the works. Here are a few more pictures of the works. A considerable amount of the revetment is finished, and you know, the picture on the top left shows the armor stone, which is properly packed. It actually looks quite good. This shows you the steelwork of the recurve wall. The function of the recurve wall, if I didn't mention it before, is to limit the overtopping onto the boardwalk. One of the features of this project is that there were several drains and, unfortunately, sewage connections to the drains, you know, coming from various facilities north of the coastal road. And so some of these drains have to be built as we go along. On the right-hand side is our typical monitoring form, which our engineers fill out every day. We also track the progress monthly and, as I said before, certify the works. Right now, the works are at about 23% complete, making fair progress despite the COVID situation. COVID actually has had an impact on the pace of work, but the contractor has been good in keeping it going and working through the issues. The last thing I'd like to share with you is what I see as the next steps. This project only addresses 1.1 kilometer of Kingston Harbour's shoreline, but there are several pieces of shoreline that need to be addressed. And so as a next step and some of the challenges that we saw or we are seeing in this project, Jamaica can access Green Climate Fund grant funding for additional coastal works for climate change, adaptation and mitigation. We do have an application through Airport Authority of Jamaica pending Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Ministry of Finance support. There are some challenges in getting these large grant applications through government, even from one government institution to the next. It takes time for the number of persons involved to understand them and the implication. Nonetheless, we do have the support of the CDD as well as the Climate Change Division. I said the CDD because the CDD is one of two regionally accredited agents, so to speak, of Green Climate Fund. And so I see the other works that we have to do in the harbour being possible by accessing this grant funding. The next thing I see us doing is when we do get this grant funding is to build out and to reinforce some of the dunes and shorelines. Again, we have an average loss of about 11 million US, and we need about 43 million US to complete the protection of Kingston Harbour. And by obviously putting in these protection works, we gradually reduce the loss that we experience from severe events. I see in terms of institutional challenges, two things which as engineers we need to kind of look out for. One, there seems to be a little trend of using what I would call non-standard contracts, you know, kind of venturing off of the tried and proven FIDIC contract. I find it less useful than the FIDIC contract, and my suggestion would be that where we see these things with our clients, especially these larger works, that we encourage them to stick to FIDIC. Also, you know, it's really interesting sometimes between agency, the cooperation is slow. And what we feel can take a few days invariably takes 4 months, and then can cause some delays. So we'll also have to look at overcoming that challenge of cooperation between institutions to speed up some of these national projects. In terms of some of the shorelines which we need to protect, the Palisades dunes, they're not finished as yet. If you notice on Palisades, there are some low sections. There are 3 low sections actually. Those were supposed to be topped up with sand to 24 feet, I believe. Those need to be done. The airport authority has identified that as one of their projects to do in the future with funding. The dunes south of the airport as well, some of them have washouts, which is part of the reason why in Ivan, the Palisades was overtopped. We have to see these issues and address them in a timely way before they get washed out. And so those 2 need to be topped up. And in Port Royal, we need to protect the town and the proposed development in that town in the future when, you know, it becomes needed. So that's a little snapshot in terms of not only the Port Royal Street work, but some of the other works that need to be done. And that's the end of my presentation here. I promise it wouldn't have been as long as Martin's.
And it was just as interesting. So thank you very much, Dr. Burgess. Quite an insightful presentation. It seems to also incorporate, just by driving by, that there will be some road improvements as well.
Yes, so the 3 lanes will be maintained next to this boardwalk.
Okay, okay.
As well as associated drain, as I've mentioned. But to be honest with you, the roadworks, although it's more than half of the project value, is somewhat easier than the postal works.
Okay. And any questions from the participants?
There's a question. It's in regards to the sewage. So in the presentation, there was mentioned that, as Inia said, sadly, provision of sewage. So the person wanted to know, would it be what would be the ideal solution for sewage issue and prevent nutrient to the harbor? So basically preventing nutrients from getting to the harbor.
All right, well, this project is not about sewage collection or treatment. Unfortunately, we have to pass off some of those issues to NWC in terms of capturing the connections that were identified. But to address your question, because I know a fair bit about it as well, Soapberry was conceptualized 20 years ago to capture a lot of the sewage in Kingston. I think 2 of the cells area have been built out, 2 of the 4 cells. And I believe the environmentalists are also saying that the harbor is recovering because with the soaring of additional areas and with the diverting of some of the sewage treatment plants through the lift stations to Soapberry, there have been improvements in the water quality in Kingston Harbour in recent years. We need a little presentation on it, I suppose, from Professor Webb or one of those who are well versed on it. But that's the only thing I can say about it. As a matter of fact, I think Gary can tell us more about it with Soapberry and the lift stations.
Well, I can add something. I know a little about sewage. There has been a lot of effort by the NWC to retire sewage treatment plants within the corporate area, convert them to pumping stations, and divert the flows towards Soapberry. Now, there may still be, what you have to understand, because of the housing development, or the unplanned development rather, throughout the corporate area, it's not uncommon to see Gully Banks with people building houses. And you have all these people building houses on the Gully Banks, and there's not enough space for any form of appropriate sewage treatment. So they just have these drain pipes go straight into the gully. So I would, without doing any type of investigation, I believe the majority of the sewage being deposited untreated into the harbor are from these informal developments along these gullies, because I know that the NWC has taken serious effort to either rehabilitate or convert their existing plants throughout the corporate area to pumping stations. Any more questions? Oh, Christopher, you are trying to share a video?
I thought I shared it.
It didn't play. You have to try again.
Okay, 1 second.
I think you have to stop sharing and then do it. Trisha, where are you? You did it the last time.
I did it the last time. As in,
Yeah, with
you'd have to
Martin.
reach it. Do you have the video in a folder by itself that you can just click on the video itself, not in the PowerPoint presentation?
Don't ask me to find that now.
Okay.
Yeah, it was in a presentation that I emailed to you from WeTransfer.
Okay. Okay.
All right. Let me continue. Any more questions?
I'm not seeing any more questions from the participants.
Is that because they're hungry and I think it's lunchtime?
Are you offering refreshments online?
Yes, virtual refreshments. What would you like?
Me, nothing. It's fine.
Virtual. Christopher, so I was not clear. The seawall protection that you're doing, it's for what return year event?
All right, so the elevation of the road is set at the 50 year, but the revetment on the seawall is to the 100-year future climate.
Future? I don't understand. What is future climate?
In a nutshell, you know, well, we know from designing drains and from various things that we use, for example, the 10-year return period or the 25-year return period event. But what is a 10-year or 25-year return period now may very well not be 10-year or 25-year return period event in the future. So you look at what you call climate connections between, for example, the wave heights, and you have a fair idea how sea level will change in the future, and you project that to your design period. A lot of the funding agencies, they may ask for up to 2050 or up to 2075, and so you estimate what the climate might be at that period in time. In general, the world's climate is on, I don't want to say the worst case trajectory, but it's definitely not anything hopeful for any change. So it makes choosing scenarios pretty easy. You know, there's been little or no abatement in emissions. So we know from the climate models, we have a fair idea in the climate models, how sea level will change, how wind will change, how hurricanes might change. I shouldn't say we have a fair idea, not an excellent idea. And so we'll look at the wave climate or the conditions in 2050. It doesn't make sense, in other words, to design something that is only relevant now, which 10 years after you design it, it's not relevant or true. It's not 50 year anymore, it's probably 10 year.
Okay, there are two questions here. Thank you, Mr. Burgess. The first question is, if 50 is 1.7 meter, 50 years, 1.7 meter, how much higher than today's road, that is the Port Royal Street, is the new boardwalk?
Not certain if I understand that. If 50 is 1.7 meters, how much higher than today's road? Okay. In general, about 0.3 meters. So the 0.3 to 0.5 meters. So a lot of the road is between 1.2 to 1.5 meters now. And so there is some amount of lifting, if I had the drawings to show you quickly, of the roads, of the two lengths of roads. So about 0.3 to 0.5 meters each.
Oh, okay, thank you. Another question. The modeling that was done, how are you able to determine the existing condition? Also, where did the data come from?
Not certain what is meant by existing condition, but we did a condition assessment of the revetment that was there. We actually did one in 2006 and one again in 2018. But in general, we collected bathymetric, topographic, geotechnical data for the project area. And those were, and in terms of the wave data, we used hindcast models and as well as climate models to inform how the waves would change in the future. So basically, those were the data that we used to model the project areas condition.
Okay, thank you. That's it for questions here. Gary?
All right, thank you, Dr. Burgess, and thank you, participants, for your questions. We have come to the end of day 2, and we once again like to thank our sponsors. Our gold sponsors are JIE Engineering Consultants Limited, Premier Land and Water Development, Eno White and Associates Limited, and our silver sponsors, Isratech Jamaica Limited, National Works Agency, GDM Associates Limited, SCL Jamaica Limited, and Conrad Douglas and Associates, with Spur Open being our supporting sponsor. I understand that there's a late question. What is the question?
Yes, Gary.
Gary, okay. Question on here. It's basically asking what is wrong with Kingston and St. Andrew each time it rains because it floods. So basically, why is there flooding?
Yeah.
Christopher, you'll take that?
Yeah, I'll give it a crack, Gary, because we're actually looking at the Marcus Garvey flood controls now. You know, a lot of our flood control, we have to separate in the public's mind the ideas of drainage and flood control. So drainage are the drop inlets that we see on the side of the road. You know, when we see pictures on TV, very often it shows that flooding. But that drainage is connected to flood control, which is definitely not as new as a drainage that we see on roads. But in general, also flood controls have been in place for the last 50, 70 years. And in the last 50, 70 years, Kingston has grown up. And not only has Kingston grown up, but in general, there's been a change in the intensities of rainfall events. And so it's time, just like how we've addressed some of our road issues, or road network issues, which adds considerable value to quality of life, reducing delays in getting around. It's time now for us to, I think, address the flood control issues and the major drains that allow for drainage to work. So I would say the reason why we flood very often during these rainfall events is a combination of the flood control systems being terribly undersized, a quick check of 6 or 7 of the major gullies which drain central to western Kingston is that what we need now is almost twice the size. So we're going to have to go in and rebuild some of those older, smaller drains. And I would say a second reason why we flood is that, yes, some of the drainage in the road, we need to, in some instances, install additional drainage in some of these roads. And and, you know, ensure that they're of the proper capacity. You know, if you look, for example, on Old Hope Road that was done 10, 15 years ago, hardly has an issue with flooding in the upper parts, where it was widened to 4 lanes from 2 lanes. And so we can get it right. We just have to go about seeing what is deficient and improving it. We have a beautiful document that was done 15 years ago, drainage master plan for Jamaica. There were 21 areas identified, and I think we're not at the end of the roadworks that we need to get done, but I think that it's time now to look at some of these drainage works and to get them done to improve our quality of life. But if I had to choose, I would choose road first, then drainage, primarily because road earn us money each day as a society by just making it quicker and easier to get around. But if we can get them right at the same time, then we should get them right. Gary, that's it.
Okay, Dr. Burgess, there is another late question. What software was used to model storm surge conditions?
All right, so we model storm surge in 2 ways. One is with a 1D, 2D model that looks at wind and wave setup and shoreline, and then we also use MIC, which simulates, we can simulate particular hurricanes and how they track over the project domain or near to the project domain. I prefer to use a hindcast model, which is 1D, 2D, because I can look at all hurricanes in a probabilistic way rather than a few hurricanes in great detail. Yeah, I don't know if that answers the question.
All right, thank you, Dr. Burgess. And the question you answered pertaining to the flooding of Kingston, that was from actually TVJ. I don't know if you're advocating back for another Gully government, but it's quite a conundrum that we're in as we have the various developments, and as you said, what capacities the drainage were built for. You'll notice that a lot of developments, some of the like these nice, beautiful paved bricks, nobody wants to keep any little green area. So a lot more persons are channeling their drainage water back onto the road. But yes, there are some issues, particularly Marcus Garvey Drive and I think the Malines Road and the Walton Park Road areas as well. But overall, as you stated, there is a master plan, and I do recall that the government has indicated that they'll be tackling drainage in a serious way in the coming months and years to come. So we thank you, Dr. Burgess. There are more questions from the participants.
Not seeing any right now, Gary.
All right, so thank you all. We thank all our presenters, the Port Authority team of Captain Hopton DeLissa, Mr. Gary Lawrence. We thank Martin Addington at very short notice, who was able to fill in for Joseph Shakir on his presentation, and finally Dr. Christopher Burgess. And in particular, we thank you, our JIE members and others, for once again supporting us throughout Engineers Week 2020. This is by no means the end. We are just at the middle, and tomorrow we will continue with day 3, maintenance, engineering, and management. So that and you can still register. It's still open. It starts at 10 a.m. and the topics to be discussed include maintenance of healthcare facilities, and that will be done by Mr. Godfrey Boyd, General Manager of PETCOM. And we have air quality ventilation in buildings, implementation and maintenance. What an appropriate topic at this time, from Miss Kelisa Banks. And we also have preventative and reliability engineering from Mr. Rupert James, Facilities Manager, Port Authority of Jamaica. And finally, health and safety in the workplace from Mr. Andrew Dale. He's the Assistant Director, Occupational Safety and Health Department for the Ministry of Labor and Social Security. So we thank you all for attending, and we will see you tomorrow.